Forget the movies. Forget the red phone. Forget the generals huddling over maps in a smoke-filled bunker. For 50 years, Hollywood told us how the end begins, but they got it wrong. The most dangerous moment in American history does not start in a war room hundreds of feet underground. It starts in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning while the coffee is still brewing. The reality isn't cinematic. It is silent, personal, and terrifyingly domestic. It begins in a kitchen lit by soft morning light, or perhaps in a car idling at a red light. It begins without a rumor or a threat, but as a sudden event. The first sign isn't a mushroom cloud on the horizon. It is a sound, a tone broadcast to every phone, television, and emergency alert device in the nation. When that text appears, the language is terse and stripped of emotion. National emergency alert. Confirmed nuclear strike. Shelter immediately. In that specific moment, the human mind struggles. The words feel cinematic, impossible, like something belonging to history books or old newsreel footage rather than our Tuesday morning. But this time the message is real, and the consequences will unfold hour by hour, household by household. Here lies the first and most dangerous misconception. Contrary to popular belief, and contrary to the nightmares we were sold, the immediate danger is not the entire nation being consumed at once. A nuclear strike does not simply end a country. It creates zones of devastation. There will be zones of severe risk, yes, but there will also be vast zones where survival is entirely possible if the correct actions are taken early. The geography of the United States breaks into pieces: the direct blast radius, the fire zone, and the fallout path. Most Americans actually live far beyond the worst of these areas. Understanding this distinction is the difference between panic and action. The instinct is to believe everything is over. The reality is that for most, the struggle is just beginning. In that moment of realization, the familiar world fractures, and the responsibility for safety shifts from the federal system to your specific household. The government has emergency systems capable of extraordinary coordination, but they are not instantaneous. For the next few days, you are the system. The question is no longer if the world has changed. The question is simply how you respond. In the first hour after the alert sounds, before the dust has even settled, the greatest threat to your survival is not radiation. It is confusion. We are a nation built on movement. For generations, the automobile has been our symbol of freedom, our escape hatch. When trouble strikes, the American instinct is to grab the car keys, load up the family, and hit the road. We assume that distance equals safety. But in this specific scenario, that instinct, however powerful, is often catastrophic. Consider the sheer mechanics of the situation. Within minutes of the alert, communications networks begin to clog as millions of people attempt to call loved ones simultaneously. The digital grid struggles under the weight of human panic. As these calls fail, fear spikes, and the decision to evacuate is made not out of strategy, but out of anxiety. Millions of families will rush to their cars at the exact same moment. Highways will slow to a crawl, then a standstill. The evacuation corridors you see on maps assume an orderly flow of traffic. They do not account for a populace driven by terror. Gas stations will close or run dry within the hour. What begins as an escape turns into a trap. Imagine sitting in gridlock, 10 miles from home, surrounded by thousands of other idling cars. You are no longer in a protective shelter. You are in a glass and steel cage, exposed to the elements. And this is where the invisible danger arrives. The first 12 hours after a detonation are defined by the movement of fallout. This is the radioactive dust sucked up by the blast and carried by the wind. It doesn't sweep across the entire nation instantly. It drifts. If you are stuck on a highway, you are sitting ducks for this dust as it settles across open fields and road surfaces. Movement in this phase does not reduce your exposure, it likely increases it. The families who survive this initial phase are not necessarily the ones with the fastest cars or the most bug-out gear. They are the ones who remain calm long enough to think. They understand a counterintuitive truth. In the earliest stage, Survival depends on clarity of action, not speed of movement. Unless you are within the direct blast radius or the immediate fire zone, the first principle of survival is simple. Shelter where you are. This goes against every fiber of our being. We want to do something. We want to run. But the most disciplined action you can take is to stay put. Most Americans live far enough away from strategic targets that the blast itself is not the killer. The fallout is. And fallout can be defeated by simple physics. Sheltering is about placing mass between you and the radiation. You need layers of dense material, concrete, brick, earth, heavy wood, anything that slows or blocks the particles. If you have a basement, that is your fortress. The earth surrounding the basement walls provides excellent natural shielding. If you don't have a basement, an interior room on the lowest floor is your next best option. The goal is to put as many walls between you and the outside air as possible. While the highways are turning into parking lots and panic is spreading across the airwaves, the disciplined man is securing his perimeter. He is closing windows and turning off ventilation systems that draw air from the outdoors. He is creating a sealed environment. This period requires a mental shift. You are not hiding. You are engaging in a strategic wait. You are letting the chaos of the first few hours burn itself out outside your wall. The roads are for the unprepared. The shelter is for the prudent. By staying off the road, you avoid the unpredictable variables, other panicked drivers, blocked routes, and shifting wind patterns. You preserve your fuel. You keep your family together in a controlled environment rather than scattering them into a chaotic one. The first 12 hours are about two realities: fallout movement and communication difficulty. By choosing to shelter, you mitigate the first and give yourself a stable base to handle the second. You are buying time. And in a crisis of this magnitude, time is the most valuable commodity you possess. While others are fleeing into the unknown, you are securing the known. That is the foundation of survival. Once the door is shut and the initial physical barriers established, a secondary crisis begins to unfold inside the home. It is quiet, but it is deafening. We have become a society addicted to constant, instantaneous connection. In the first hour, the modern reflex is to look at the screen in your palm. We expect the blue light to give us answers. We expect the internet to tell us we are safe. But in this scenario, the device in your pocket becomes a liability, not an asset. As millions of Americans attempt to access the same bandwidth simultaneously, communications networks begin to clog. The sophisticated digital grid that runs our lives is not built for total simultaneous usage. It is fragile. When the networks don't fail outright, they will become something worse: unreliable. Social media, if it loads at all, will be filled with rumor, speculation, and misinformation spreading faster than facts. In the absence of official news, panic fills the void. You will see reports of strikes that haven't happened, safe zones that are actually dangerous, and cures that are harmful. The family that relies solely on digital updates risks making panic choices based on incorrect assumptions. This is the moment for the analog pivot. For the older generation, this shift is a return to familiarity. For the younger generation, it is a shock. You must effectively step back in time. This is where simple analog tools become invaluable. The most critical piece of technology in your home is no longer your smartphone or your laptop. It is a battery-powered radio. While the internet fractures into noise, the radio spectrum offers a singular, linear lifeline. You must tune to emergency frequencies. The federal government and state emergency agencies have practiced these broadcasts for decades precisely for moments like this. They are designed to operate when the cellular towers are dark. These broadcasts provide the clearest guidance on which areas are safe, which are hazardous, and when movement may be necessary. Listening to the radio changes the psychology of the room. It replaces the frantic refreshing of a web page with a steady, authoritative voice. It anchors the household to a single source of verified truth. While one ear is on the radio, the rest of the household must engage in immediate resource management. The analog pivot isn't just about information, it is about physics. You must secure your environment's air and water systems before the infrastructure degrades. During these first 12 hours, air management is critical. You must keep windows sealed. More importantly, you must locate and turn off any ventilation systems that draw air from outdoors. Central air conditioning units, attic fans, or intake vents often pull exterior air into the home. If fallout is settling on your roof, you do not want your own house sucking it into your living room. You are sealing the hull of your ship. Simultaneously, you must address water. This is a race against time. The municipal water systems may remain functional for a short period, but they should not be assumed to last. The pressure is likely to drop as pumps fail or power grids go offline. The instruction is simple but urgent. Fill containers with clean tap water while it is still flowing. Fill the bathtub. Fill the sinks. Fill every pitcher, pot, and bucket you own. This is not hoarding. It is banking a critical resource while the withdrawal window is still open. Once the pressure dies, that tap becomes a useless fixture. You need to capture hundreds of gallons in those first minutes and hours. Finally, the analog pivot requires a shift in human behavior. Chaos outside breeds chaos inside if left unchecked. The noise outside may fade, but the silence inside can grow loud. Children will ask questions you cannot answer. Elderly family members may become disoriented. To combat this, you must establish a calm internal order. You cannot simply sit and wait. You must operate. Assign roles. This is a tactic as old as seafaring. A crew with a job is a crew that doesn't mutiny. The comms officer. Assign one person to monitor radio updates exclusively. Their job is to filter the noise and report only the facts. The quartermaster. Assign one person to manage supplies. They take inventory of the pantry, the water, and the medical kit. They know exactly what you have. The morale officer. Assign one person to comfort children or elderly family members. Their job is to maintain emotional stability. This structure does two things. First, it ensures the necessary work gets done. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it gives everyone a purpose. Panic fractures decision-making. Structure restores it. When you give someone a job, you give them a way to control their fear. Survival in these first critical hours is not about physical strength or bravado. It is about discipline. It is about ignoring the urge to check the phone, ignoring the urge to run outside, and instead focusing on the small, manageable world inside. Your walls. By the time the sun sets on that first day, the family that has pivoted to analog, that has sealed their air, banked their water, and assigned their roles, is no longer just surviving. They are operating. They have created a pocket of order in a world of disorder, and that order is what will carry them through the night. By the 12th hour, the initial adrenaline dump has faded. The frantic energy that drove you to seal the windows and fill the bathtub has dissipated, leaving behind a cold, quiet reality. A new rhythm is forming inside the shelter. Fear has not disappeared, but it has settled into something quieter. Vigilance. You're now entering the siege phase. In this period, the challenge is no longer immediate reaction, but endurance. The world outside has paused, and your world has shrunk to the square footage of your home. The families who endure this phase are not the ones with the most guns or the biggest bunkers. They are the ones who understand the physics of consumption and the fragility of the human mind. The first law of the siege is water discipline. Most households drastically underestimate how quickly water becomes scarce. The math is unforgiving. The average person requires roughly 2 liters per day for drinking alone just to maintain basic cognitive function. That doesn't account for sanitation or hygiene. If you failed to fill the bathtub in the first hour, or if your storage is limited, you must now rely on the hidden reserves. Your home is a machine that holds water, even when the pipes are dry. The water heater is a 40 to 50-gallon tank of potable water standing right in your utility closet. The toilet tanks, the upper reserve, not the bowl, hold dozens of usable liters. Accessing this requires knowledge, not just thirst. You must know how to shut off the intake, open the drain valve, and filter the sediment. If this water was stored early, it must now be rationed thoughtfully. Every drop used for washing is a drop that cannot be drunk. This is where the discipline of the siege begins. Food decisions follow a similar brutal logic. This is not the time for cooking elaborate meals or maintaining normal eating habits. The objective is slow, steady caloric intake to keep the body warm and the brain functioning. Shelf-stable foods, rice, beans, canned vegetables, protein bars, provide energy without spoiling. But the danger here is psychological. Stress snacking is a real phenomenon. In high-anxiety situations, humans use food to self-soothe. Emotional eating and panic consumption can deplete a week's worth of supplies in 2 days. The head of the household must enforce a ration schedule. The family that eats with discipline will endure longer. You eat to fuel the machine, not to comfort the soul. Then comes the unglamorous reality that few survival movies discuss: sanitation. In a sealed environment with no running water, hygiene is not a luxury. It is a defensive tactic. Illness during a crisis is not a small inconvenience. It is a threat multiplier. Without regular waste removal, infections can escalate rapidly, turning your shelter into a biohazard zone. You must establish a waste system immediately. The simplest methods are often the most effective. Line buckets or containers with heavy-duty plastic bags. Do not mix liquid and solid waste if possible, as this accelerates decomposition and smell. Seal waste tightly and store it as far away from the living space as possible. Wash hands with sanitizing wipes or scarce soap water after every interaction to prevent microbial spread. Order reduces chaos. However, the most underestimated factor in these 48 hours is not biological, but psychological. The noise of the world has stopped. The silence inside the home can grow loud. This is the siege of the mind. Children will ask questions that adults cannot answer. When can we go outside? Is it over? Elderly family members may become disoriented or struggle with the break in their medical routines. Strong individuals may struggle with the crushing weight of uncertainty. The antidote to this psychological erosion is structure. You must artificially create time. In a bunker, day and night lose their meaning. You must impose a schedule. Times for listening to radio updates, times for eating, times for rest, and times for activity. Even in a crisis, routine signals safety. 0800, breakfast and ration check. 0900, radio silence check, listening for official broadcasts. In 1200, midday meal. 1500, hygiene and waste management. 1800, evening update and discussion. Fill the gaps with calm conversation, storytelling, or quiet breathing. Whatever reinforces collective steadiness. These hours test the family's internal cohesion more than its supplies. If the group fractures emotionally, the physical preparations become irrelevant. The families who endure do not simply survive physically, they guard their morale. They remain patient. They avoid wild speculation about what is happening in the cities or on the front lines. They stay present because they know that the most important decisions are still ahead. As you approach the 48-hour mark, you are reaching a pivot point. The radiation levels outside are peaking and beginning their initial decline. The panic on the highways has likely turned into a tragic stillness. Inside, you have weathered the initial shock. You have established a micro-civilization with its own laws, its own economy of calories and water, and its own culture of discipline. You have survived the shock. Now you must prepare for the shift. The door cannot stay closed forever. We have reached hour 48. Inside the shelter, the air is stale and the wait has been agonizing. But outside, invisible physics are working in your favor. This specific mark, 48 hours, brings the first genuine moment of choice. The initial paralysis of the event is breaking, and the question shifts from, how do I survive the blast, to how do I adapt to the aftermath? The radiation that has settled over the landscape is not static. It decays. The intensity of fallout drops significantly after the first 2 days. This is the primary reason why the discipline of the first 48 hours was so critical. By simply sitting still behind concrete or earth, you have allowed the worst of the energetic particles to burn themselves out while you remained shielded. The environment is still hazardous, but it is no longer the immediate death sentence it was on day 1. Now, the siege phase evolves into the assessment phase. Your battery-powered radio, previously a source of fragmented alerts, now becomes a tool for strategic mapping. By the second day, the initial shock across the nation has stabilized enough for response coordination to begin. Federal and state agencies will start broadcasting specific data, mapping affected zones, identifying which regions are total losses, and, crucially, announcing where medical triage is being established. You are listening for patterns. You are listening for the locations of clean zones versus hot zones. This is where you face the most dangerous decision of the entire crisis. Do you stay or do you move? This decision cannot be made on impulse. It must be a calculation. Moving too soon is a fatal error. It exposes you to lingering radiation and the chaos of the desperate. However, moving too late has its own risks. You may find evacuation evacuation routes blocked by debris or checkpoints, or you may face critical shortages of supplies that make travel impossible. If the official directive on the radio is to shelter in place, you must shift your mindset from hiding to resource management. You are now in for the long haul. Water assessment. Check your levels. If you have 50 gallons left and 4 people, do the math. How many days until you are dry? Food rationing. Portions must be controlled strictly. You're no longer eating for hunger. You're eating for maintenance. Sanitation. Your waste systems must be maintained religiously. A breakdown here destroys the habitability of your shelter. Mental hardening. You must reinforce emotional resilience. People do not just wear down physically, they erode mentally. However, if the directive or your dwindling supplies dictates that you must evacuate, you do not simply open the door and walk out. You execute a clean travel protocol. The goal is not to flee blindly, but to travel deliberately. The roads may still be dangerous, not just from radiation, but from people who did not prepare. Your movement must be efficient and purposeful. Shield the body. You must place a barrier between your skin and the dust. Wear long sleeves, gloves, and hoods. Every inch of skin covered is an inch protected from beta burns. Protect the lungs. This is non-negotiable. Use masks, N95s if you have them, or multiple layers of dense cloth to limit the inhalation of radioactive dust. Breathing the fallout is far more dangerous than walking on it. Travel light, travel smart. You cannot carry your entire house. Carry only essentials: identification, water, calorie-dense food, protein bars, not canned goods that add weight, a first aid kit, your radio, a flashlight, and warm clothing. Trust in digital systems should remain low. The internet, if it flickers back to life, will still be a swamp of confusion. Traffic apps will not show you the roadblocks or the radiation plumes. Stick to the analog broadcasts. They remain the anchor. Whether you stay or go, the 48-hour mark is the threshold. You're no longer a victim of the event. You're an active participant in your own survival. The silence of the bunker is ending. The noise of the new world is beginning. The families that survive this transition are the ones who moved not out of fear, but out of strategy. They have waited out the worst. Now they make their move. When the first 72 hours pass, the crisis does not end, but a fundamental shift occurs. The immediate danger of radiation and panic begins to give way to a new phase: rebuilding, organizing, and stabilizing. The families who endured the first 3 days now face a different challenge: shaping the environment around them so that survival is not temporary, but sustainable. This begins with a careful assessment. You step outside with caution, only when official guidance confirms that exposure risk has declined. The landscape will not match the world you remembered. Streets may be quiet, power may be out, and familiar landmarks may be damaged. A crucial mindset must form quickly. The objective is not to restore what was, but to build what is needed now. The most powerful tool in this stage is not your stockpile. It is your community. A family alone can survive a short emergency, but a family supported by neighbors can survive a long crisis. Human cooperation is not simply moral sentimentality. It is a hard strategic asset. One household may have tools, another medical knowledge, and another access to a well or generator. By diversifying skills, you distribute risk. In many historic disasters, informal networks form faster than formal institutions. You must move to establish neighborhood check-ins immediately. Identify the vulnerable, the elderly, the chronically ill, and families with infants, because a community is only as strong as its most fragile members. Practical steps must be taken to consolidate survival architecture. Resource consolidation. Identify long-term water sources like wells or rain collection, and consider sharing kitchens to reduce fuel waste. Medical coordination. Combine first aid resources and assign trained individuals to health roles. Security. Establish schedules to observe surroundings, not to intimidate, but to deter opportunistic harm. Local leaders will rise during this time, often ordinary people who emerge not through authority, but through calm and clarity. The next weeks will determine whether communities collapse inward or rise through cooperation and discipline. The nuclear strike marked a fracture in the familiar world, but not the end of it. Preparedness does not end at survival. It continues into rebuilding. The goal is not merely to endure the dark. The goal is to live